Well, thank you everyone for coming. First of all, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in War Memorial Park. Thank you. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Microphones. Can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, that you speak directly into your microphone. The microphone stem can be moved so that it is close to your mouth as possible. And please, on that note, switch your mobile phones off or onto silent. Thank you. Right. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have received apologies from Councillor Katecha and Councillor Court. Are there any other apologies? I don't think. Oh, Councillor Harvey, I believe, isn't it? Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. And any urgent matters? No. In that case, item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September 2023. Is everybody happy that the minutes are an accurate account of the last meeting? Okay, yeah. Thank you. And in that case, on to item 5. Excuse me. Updated human resources policies. The purpose of the report is to review and approve the updated disciplinary policy and procedure, statutory officer disciplinary policy and procedure. So the recommendation to the committee to review and approve the following updated policies, disciplinary policy and procedure, statutory officer disciplinary policy and procedure. And over to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you. So constitutionally, the HR committee are responsible for a set of policies that have a significant impact on staff and or costs to the council, and this is outlined in section 2.1 of the report. HR policies are reviewed on an ongoing basis, and policies may be reviewed at more regular intervals due to new ways of work, procedural or process changes. Minor reviews have been made to these policies, which are outlined in the report, and the proposed revisions to these policies have been discussed with local representatives of the council's recognised trade union, Unison. So if we just have a look at the disciplinary policy, the purpose of this policy is to set and maintain standards of conduct within the council, and in doing so, ensuring that all employees are treated fairly and consistently. It is also designed to help and encourage employees to achieve and maintain satisfactory standards of conduct. Section 3.2 outlines the revisions that have been made to the policy. These include updating of job titles, providing further clarity on items, or to bring in line with best practice. The second policy for consideration, which is on section 4, which is the statutory officer disciplinary policy. Just to clarify, this policy only applies to the 3 statutory roles within the council. This is the head of paid service, the section 151 officer, and the monitoring officer. The aim of this policy is to promote conduct which supports the aims and values of the council, as the council expects the highest standards of conduct from staff and in particular its statutory officers. Section 4.2 sets out the revisions that have been made to this policy, and I can confirm that Unison have reviewed both policies and are supportive of the amendments that are being proposed. Welcome any questions arising from this.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Are there any questions at all? No? Everybody happy? Any debate? No? Right. Well, in that case, sorry, Councillor Basham.
Thank you. I was just going to add for the record that the table set up by officers is enormously helpful in enabling review of these documents, and I think that's possibly why there are limited or no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Basham. Yes, they are very well set out, and so thanks to the officers for providing that information. That's been a great help. In which case, I move that we, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat, that we approve the recommendation. Everybody happy? Yep, thank you. Right. Item 6, pay and benefits review and update. The recommendation to the committee is to note the report. This report provides an update on the progress of the Council's pay and benefits review since the previous HR committee on the 18th of September 2023, when the progress of the review was discussed. And now hand over to Sarah Cragg. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just beginning by way of a reminder, the overall purpose of the pay and benefits review was to provide a pay and reward structure which was financially sustainable for the council now and into the future, ensuring value for money for the borough's residents and communities, providing a fair and transparent system for establishing pay grades and associated allowances, ensuring the council is competitive in the marketplace and therefore able to attract and retain suitably qualified and skilled staff, being flexible enough to respond to market changes, including addressing skills shortage areas and providing career opportunities, and complying with our requirements under equal pay legislation and therefore protecting the council from potential claims. So again, by way of a reminder, in order to achieve those, there were 3 work streams undertaken as phase 1 of the review, which was the introduction of the job evaluation system, which is Corn Ferry Hay, review of all existing job roles at the council against that job evaluation system, and a review of the full pay and benefits package, including pay benchmarking. So we ran a consultation between April and June last year with all council staff and also with Unison, and that was based on a combined updated pay and benefits system. As a result of the feedback and comments during that consultation, a number of changes were made to the original proposals, and these came before HR committee along with the updated pay policy statement in July 23 and then finally approved at council. So when this previously was discussed at HR committee in September, there was a conversation around the appeals process and a request to have a little bit more information. So just to provide that for you, appeals were submitted by staff in relation to the outcome of the grading for their roles, and there were 3 main grounds for an appeal: that the job description contained factual inaccuracies, the person specification contained factual inaccuracies, and or an equivalent job or a perceived equivalent job in the organisation was graded differently. So we received a total of 107 appeals, which were all reviewed by the job evaluation panels, with the resulting 42 jobs being regraded to a higher grade, 3 roles being downgraded, and 62 job roles remaining as unchanged from the original evaluation. Just by further explanation, the roles that were downgraded were a result of management appeals where managers felt that the roles had been incorrectly graded originally. So in many cases, appeals were a combination of 2 or maybe even all 3 of the grounds stated, and there were a small number that were only on the grounds of an equivalent job being graded differently, which was 14, and for 15 others there was an updated job description only, and that tended to relate to a view that these were slightly out of date in terms of the tasks that were contained within it. So that sort of position closed out phase 1 of the pay and benefits review. We've now moved into phase 2. Because it was such a broad project, the view was it made sense to split it down into those 2 phases. So phase 2 is narrower in scope and will cover the areas outlined in section 4.2 of the report. So salaries for apprentice roles, business mileage rates, and essential car user allowance. Essentially all other payments received outside of basic pay, which includes overtime standby and call-out payments and arrangements, but there are a range of others, and contractual review and tendering process for current benefits providers. So in terms of the most recent position, the pay for apprenticeship roles has been reviewed and benchmarked against both other local authorities and also local employers, in addition to looking at the national minimum and national living wages, and that's been obviously fed into that review. A review of payments outside basic salary is also underway, including discussions with heads of service and service managers to understand in detail the types of payments that are made within their department, alongside a review of the data that's centrally held. We are also currently undertaking a review of those employees who are in receipt of essential user allowance, and again discussed with service managers in terms of which roles have that allowance and the kind of mileage and work that they're doing out in the community, so that we can take all that into account as part of the review. Obviously, if we're going to make any changes, we need to make sure that we are reflecting up-to-date HMRC rules and clearly making sure that we consider the potential climate impact, bearing in mind, obviously, business mileage has a potential to have a climate impact. We will undertake the contractual reviews and retendering of our benefits providers as and when these come up within the schedule. So that's the most recent position in terms of phase 2 of the pay benefits review, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Tustein.
Thank you, Chair. With the appeals, I saw 3 of them ended up with jobs being downgraded. Was there any negative impact on staff, sort of feeling, and not obviously if they went downgraded, or did that happen before they were reassigned to the role?
Thank you for the question. So for 2 out of the 3 roles, the managers had the conversations with the individuals up front in terms of saying that they felt it had been overgraded. So although when the original communication went out, it was at the higher grade, they had sort of explained to them that may not be where it ended up from a final position. There was one role, unfortunately, where those conversations didn't take place, but I have had a number of meetings and conversations around those with those individuals, just to sort of reassure them in terms of the process that went through, and we did have that discussion.
And they were happy with it in the end, or just came to accept?
So I think when we explored it in relation to where the other roles were in the organisation and why it had then sort of come out on re-review where it had, I think there was an acceptance that wasn't an unreasonable outcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or any discussion that anybody would like to have there? No? Right, in that case, I move that we note the report. Is everybody in agreement? Thanks. Thank you. Item number 7, the gender pay gap report. And the recommendation to the committee again is to note the report, and it summarises the council's gender pay gap situation. Thank you. Over to Louise.
Thank you, Chair. So the Gender Pay Gap report, this is an annual report, and we have a statutory requirement to publish this information. It's a very valuable tool for assessing levels of equality in the workplace, the female and male participation, and how effective talent is being maximised. All employers who have a headcount of 250 or more employees must comply with the regulations to publish both the employer's website and on the government's Equalities Office website. The gender pay shows the difference between the average, mean or medium earnings of men and women, which is expressed as a percentage of men's earnings. Example, women earn 15% less than men. In total, there are 6 various calculations to carry out, as are outlined in the report in section 3.3, but key headlines to share is overall the council is in a good position, with the vast majority of organisations having a larger pay gap. The mean gender pay gap for the whole economy in April 2023 stood at 13.2% compared to the council's mean gender pay gap at -10% in favour of women. The medium gender pay gap for the whole economy in April 23 was 14.3%, with the council's medium gender pay gap for 2023 at -23.7% in favour of women. Another aspect that we are required to report on also refers to the mean and medium bonus gender pay gap. Although the council does not pay bonuses as such, honour area payments have a performance element, so they need to be declared alongside long service awards. The mean bonus gender pay gap was 24.3% in favour of men in 2023, and the median bonus gender pay gap was 19.6% in favour of men in 2023. I think it's important to highlight that 3.5% of relevant employees received an honour area payment or a long service award, and as such, low numbers can skew the results. So to summarise, the Council's position overall in a good position when benchmarking with the gender pay gap of other organisations, and it does reflect the Council's aspirations to be a fair and inclusive employer. Welcome any queries or questions. Thank you.
Councillor Tustain.
Thank you, Chair. Playing devil's advocate, is there a point where it's actually considered to be too much in favour of women? And also, I just wondered about with the bonuses as well. So the on-area payments, that's different to the bonus ones, isn't it? So obviously there's a lot more. And is there any thoughts as to why we do have a lot more men getting bonuses? Is it the nature of the different roles they do?
Okay, so I think it's a really interesting one, isn't it, in terms of the gender pay gap in favour of women, and we've had a few conversations around that. I think the important thing for us is to use the data to assure ourselves that what we don't have is a pay structure that's perpetuating any inequality, so whether that would be an inequality towards men or an inequality towards women, because neither are where we would want to be. I think the reality of the situation is when you look at the makeup of our workforce, in terms of the most senior end of our workforce, obviously our chief executive is male, but our deputy chief executive, all of our directors and the majority of our heads of service are female. And if we look at the other end in terms of our grade A salaries, a lot of that workforce is within our parks and street scene team, which historically has been predominantly male. That is something that we are actively looking to change, increasing the number of women who are employed within that service. But that is something that obviously takes time to influence. So I think when you're looking at a mean or a median average, inevitably, if you've got women in quite some senior roles and many more women than men, and you've got many more men than women in the salary grade A, that can kind of affect it. So I think we are assured that the pay gap we do have in favour of women is related to those factors predominantly, rather than that there's anything inherently inequitable in our pay system or how it's applied. So as we are looking to address in terms of expanding on the female workforce within that grade A, and in terms of our senior roles, while I'm not suggesting we would be actively trying to recruit men, we are actively committed to making sure that the best candidate is the person who gets that job. So continuing to work on both of those, you would envisage that pay gap over time would reduce. But I am assured that that's not because there's anything fundamentally inequitable in the system that we have for pay. Sorry, long answer, but I hope that helps.
In response to the second question regarding the bonuses, that is a mixture of the honour area payments and also the long service awards. So it's during that year, so 2023, it was in favour of men, and that was the case in 2022. But in 2021, it was actually the bonuses was in favour of females. So that is the combination of both of those payments when we're working it out.
And just a supplementary on that. So if women go off on maternity leave, for example, or take career breaks, does that impact any bonus payments they might get?
No, that wouldn't. So because long service would be considered, so it wouldn't have any impact.
And also, just to follow up on that point, if they were receiving any honoraria for the job role, they are continually employed in that job role during the period of maternity. So if there was an honoraria attached to that, they would continue to receive that as well.
Yeah. Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on when exactly we're going to publish the report and in what format it will be published.
So we're required to publish it by the 31st of March. So this, after tonight's committee, it will be published within the next few weeks. And we have the 6 areas as listed in the report under section 3.3 is what we will have to upload onto the government website. Plus, in addition to that, we also put additional information on the council's BDBC website.
Anybody else have any questions? Everybody happy with it? Yep. Then I move we go with the recommendation to note the report. Okay. Agreed. Thank you. And On to item number 8, HR operations and workforce information update. This report sets out key people indicators and management information to the end of the third quarter of 23-24, making comparisons with previous year's performance where applicable. The recommendation is to note the report, and the contact officer for this again is Louise Stoner. Over to you, Louise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to confirm, myself and Sarah will be going through the report with you all tonight. So I will start with the workforce demographics as listed on section 3. So just to confirm, we continue to employ broadly the equal number of male and female staff and have a static workforce in terms of gender. There have been some slight changes to the workforce age profile categories, and these are listed on page 3 and 4 of the report. The highest proportion of our workforce does fall within the 35 to 44 and the 45 to the 54 and the 55 to the 64 age range, which is compared to the 2021 census report, which highlights the greatest number of residents living in the borough is between 35 and 55 age group. Ethnicity of the council's workforce is predominantly white British, which is also in line with the 2021 census data, which highlights that 88.5% of borough residents identify their ethnic group within the white category. Just to highlight, the number of staff reporting as white British has reduced from 75.79% to 70.35%, and we've seen a slight increase in the number of staff reporting as being from ethnic minority communities. The data in relation to staff reporting that they consider themselves as disabled has also seen a slight increase alongside a positive increase in the percentage of the workforce for whom we hold this data for. So if we move on to section 4, which is establishment and turnover, we have seen an increase in headcount in the data as of the 31st of December when the reports were run, and also an increase in FTE. Turnover rates from April to December has also decreased by 2.0% when compared to the same period in April to December, and we've received a total of 44 people leave the organisation during the first 3 quarters. We also break down the leavers by grades on section 4.7, which is on page 7 of the report. We have broken this down by the grades, so the grades prior to the pay and benefits review. So we've displayed this from the 1st of April to the 31st of July in the number grades, and then in table 4.7 and table 4.9 we've displayed the new grades from the 1st of August to the 31st of December in relation to the leavers. Out of the 44 leavers so far in 2023-24, 18 people completed an exit interview. Just to highlight, these are voluntary, and all leavers are sent a link to complete or a hard copy of the questionnaire. Section 5 of the report highlights various statistics relating to sickness absence, and where possible we've tried to compare with previous year's data. We have seen a spike in sickness absence in Q2, and there is a small number of people off on long-term sick, with some people having returned or have left the council's employment. Section 5.5 displays the top reasons for sickness absence, and just want to clarify that on section 5.5, which is on page 76 of the report, just want to clarify from the 1st of April, all absence relating to COVID-19 will be incorporated into cold, cough, flu category. It was just seemed to be missing off the bottom of the report. The top reasons for absence during the first 3 quarters of the sickness relates to stress, depression and other psychiatric illnesses, and musculoskeletal, which also correlates with the national trend in the CIPD Health and Wellbeing at Work survey. We have seen an increase in absence in reporting of musculoskeletal absences, but this does also correlate with the national trends. We continue to offer a supportive package with a focus on wellbeing, and we offer such services such as occupational health, employees assistance service, funded counselling, and we will continue to work on this area. Further information in relation to the health and wellbeing offer is also supplied in section 7 of the report. I'm just going to hand over to Sarah. Thank you.
Just wondering, as it's such a large report, does anyone have any questions at this stage rather than me going on to the tail end?
It's on section 4.10. The bottom point there on page 74, the 6 out of 18 respondents who negative feedback relating to their line manager. What action is taken with that information? So if someone criticises their boss, what do we do about that?
So I think we would look to understand in a bit more detail, I suppose, what the criticisms were, for want of a better phrase, and then how best on an individual basis to pick those up, because I think there is a balance between trying to encourage staff to share that feedback with us, and although we wouldn't necessarily guarantee that it's completely anonymous, we would obviously want a level of confidentiality so that staff are encouraged to give us their honest, reflective feedback. But clearly where there are particular themes or things of concern, then we have our HR business partners who work very closely with managers across the organisation, and so we would want to work with them, I suppose, to understand if there are particular concerns in approach or lack of development opportunities or whatever the feedback is, that we can then pick that up in a supportive way without sort of betraying specific confidences in terms of the staff that may have raised a concern as they left.
Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions. One was about sickness and one was about the exit questionnaires, actually. And just in relation to, it's often what's not said or the feedback we don't get that can be some of the most useful in the context of what Councillor Durrant's just spoken about. Have you thought about incentivising in some way the completion of exit questionnaires? I don't know how you'd incentivise it, whether you do it on a per feedback basis or a annual draw for an iPad or something, but it's just something that it's one of the most interesting pieces of a very holistic data set, and I'll just leave you with that open question. You don't need to answer it now, but if you have a view, that'd be welcome.
So thank you for the reflection on both points. I think trying to increase the number of individuals that either complete an exit questionnaire or undertake an exit interview, because again, there are preferences in terms of which people may wish to do, but absolutely that's one of the things that we're really keen to do, because you're right, it is a really rich source of feedback, and whatever the circumstances are around why individuals are leaving, there are always things that we would want to improve as an organisation. You don't ever want to be complacent, so I think any feedback that's good as well, so we can celebrate the good as well as pick up any challenges, is really important. So it's a really helpful reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. I realise I didn't posit my second question, so I'll do that on sickness if I may. Just looking at the tables on page 76 and 77, which I think compare the same period 23-24 to the reasons for sickness in 22-23. Obviously, coming off the back of the pandemic, COVID and COVID isolation was the highest in the prior year with 407 days. And anxiety, stress and depression was second. I mean, if we look at the 2023-24 table, anxiety, stress and depression has absolutely gone through the roof. It's quadrupled, and I know that we've talked about this before, and that the council has employee assistance helplines and programs in place to help with this. But it's interesting as well in the context, if you look at things like heart and cardiac and or musculoskeletal, I'm going to trip myself up now, but the movement on some of those has stayed fairly static. So it's really interesting to see COVID switch down and anxiety, stress, depression to switch right up. I don't know if you've got any views on that.
So yeah, I'll start, and then I'll let Louise join in if there's anything she wants to add. I think you're right, it is a really interesting reflection. I think my initial sense is there's an element of that reflecting wider society. So I think when we came out of the pandemic, that was an incredibly difficult period for people, and I think there's something about when you're in the middle of that, you almost don't have time to reflect on that. But actually when you then sort of come out the other side, I think the impact of that then becomes more keenly felt. I think we also have to be open and honest that we have also as an organisation been through a period of change. Obviously the outcome of the pay and benefits I do see as being really positive, because it is about moving the organisation to a more competitive place in terms of our salaries and our benefits package. But obviously that was still a significant period of change that individuals went through, and there will be a whole range of different reasons, from personal bereavements to change that's been happening outside of work to things within work. There may be a whole gambit of reasons why individuals may be off, but it is absolutely something that we continue to monitor on a regular basis. And I think whilst we do make links to other organisations and what places like the CIPD are picking up on, it doesn't mean that we sort of take the foot off the gas in terms of it being something that we continue to actively support staff with, both in terms of trying to prevent people going off in the first place, but also where they are off, making sure we provide as much support as we can to get them back to work as soon as possible when they're well enough to do so.
I'd like to follow up on that as well. Do we know if those figures are similar to other organisations with levels of stress, or do we have that information or not?
So we don't have, it is not just, as CIPD have put, this is within the number one sickness absence reason does seem to be mental ill health, unfortunately, but that's within the private and the public sector. And as Sarah said, there is many internal and external factors that sometimes, personal reasons, as well as, we've had a cost of living, financial impacts to the economy. It's those impacts on individuals, but just rest assured, the HR team, alongside line managers, take a very, supportive, reactive and proactive approach to managing sickness absence.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Tustay.
Thank you, Chair. I was reading something quite interesting actually the other today or yesterday about the increase in younger people having more time off sick, which I expect you've probably read in your sort of documentation and things. And I just wondered whether you look at that. Obviously, our demographic of employees reflects the Basingstoke demographic, and it's that bulk of sort of 35 to 60-year-old sort of age group. But obviously, with the young ones, are you seeing that, or even gender? I don't think it's necessarily so much of an issue, but I think it is this age thing where these, I think it's 24 and under, I think are actually, there's a lot more in that age group than there are in the 40 plus age groups. I don't know if there's any reflection on that in that, or whether you've got that information.
That's not information that we've got to hand at this moment in time, but that I also saw that article that you were talking about, and it is very interesting. The primary age group is a lot older at the council than the 24, etc. But it's definitely something that we can explore further and look into.
Anyone else? No? So back to Sarah.
Thank you. So just to briefly take us through the rest of the report. So we left off just coming up to section 6, which is our recruitment equality monitoring. So this compares the data for the whole of the last financial year with the 3 quarters so far this year in terms of the number of applications that we've received and the demographic breakdown of those. So just to pull out a few highlights, you'll see that it's broadly equitable, as is our workforce in terms of male-female applicants. Our highest number of applicants are within the 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 age range. So especially that 18 to 24 range is, I think, significantly higher than we saw last year, which is really positive because, again, that's a group that we're particularly keen to engage with. we have seen a reduction in the percentage of our applicants reporting as white British, and again some commensurate rises in some of the applicant groups from ethnic minority communities. The other bit I wanted to draw the committee's attention to is we undertook some work, or a project was undertaken by one of our colleagues in the policy team, Jade Anderson-Francis, as part of a qualification that she was undertaking that was particularly looking at applications received compared to new starters at the council and focusing on 3 of the protected characteristics: age, gender and ethnicity. So she did a lot of work looking through those results and putting some statistic rigour in terms of what that was telling us. So the results showed that there was not a statistically significant difference between the numbers of applications received versus the number of new starters in any of the 3 areas. So, i.e., if someone was from, say, an ethnic minority community, there was an equal chance of them being successful in that role if that application was received. So that was really positive and a really helpful piece of work that was undertaken. The project also involved a detailed analysis of application new starter numbers against the census, and you'll see the graphical representation of that just over the page just before section 7. So the key points of that, which again I think are useful for us to reflect on, is that overall the council has a lower percentage of applicants and new starters reporting as a white ethnic background compared with the census 2021 data for the borough. So we are arguably more representative in terms of our applicant levels than that data. In relation to gender, we're broadly in line with the borough, which again is broadly 50-50 split, although not exactly. And in relation to age, I think the most significant difference is that over 55 age range, where the census data indicates a much higher percentage of people in that age range than are applying for roles at the council. But I do think it's important to recognise that includes everyone from a census perspective over 55, including those who would probably no longer consider themselves of working age and therefore are not actively seeking employment. In terms of promoting health and wellbeing, and Louise has already alluded to this as part of the conversation around sickness, we are really committed as council to promote a healthy and safe working environment. Get my words out. And so we continue to focus on the support that we can provide for staff. So a number of these we've referred to before at this committee, things like our employee assistance programme, offering 24/7 access to counselling, but also wellbeing support, advice on things like legal advice, and importantly financial advice, which again in the recent sort of cost of living crisis has been incredibly important. We also have a very active occupational health service which supports us both with staff who may have gone off sick, but also in terms of staff who are at work, but just making sure that we provide any adjustments that we need in terms of supporting them to do their role. We also have a network of internal mental health champions. So this is our kind of ongoing support that we provide. Alongside that, we run campaigns and initiatives to kind of supplement that, so focusing on particular mental health, physical health, but also opportunities for staff to spend time together in a more informal environment as part of creating positive working culture for staff at the council. So you can see set out a number of the initiatives that we've done, things like our yoga classes, which are running, coffee mornings, a Restart Heart campaign, which is a new one that we've not done before, which including lunchtime sessions with CPR training. We do have a number of defibrillators on site, both in Civic and also in some of our satellite sites in both Wade Road and Down Grange. So really important that staff feel comfortable and confident in using those if that's needed. And we also have a number of things planned coming up, including health checks and also some of those more social activities, such as a rounders match and a quiz. In terms of learning and development, we're always committed to developing and supporting our staff. And that's not just through things like apprenticeships, although obviously that's one of the things that we're really proud of. So we currently have 16 staff either in apprentice-specific roles or current staff members in other roles who are being upskilled via an apprenticeship qualification. So that has enabled us to meet the KPI that we set around that, but obviously that's just the start point for us. We want to continue to see how we can use apprenticeships to develop both existing staff as well as introduce apprentice roles into the organisation. We also support employability at local schools, colleges and community events in the borough. And again, some highlights of those. We had students from BCOT come to the Civic Office for an employability event. We've supported apprenticeship fairs and offering work placements, as well as a number of upcoming planned events at schools, universities, colleges, and also some work placements in the pipeline. Finally, for this report, in terms of our organisational development activity, so we are a really good organisation and we do a lot of positive things around our workforce, but again, we always want to see where we can improve. So we recently undertook an internal comms review, which was between December last year and finished this month, which has been led by an internal comms specialist from outside the organisation, which has included interviews with members of the wider leadership team, staff focus groups, and a survey that was open to all staff, and we're expecting the results of that shortly. We also have some workshops which are actually starting this week with staff to explore a set of proposed new values, which will include not only discussion around those values, whether they're the right values and whether there's anything else staff would want to see, but also what sorts of behaviours they would associate with those values, and they will be both online and in-person workshop options for staff. And finally, we're doing quite a big piece of work around the recruitment process, encompassing all aspects of how we seek to attract, recruit and onboard staff, including introducing values-based recruitment when those new values are launched, designing and delivering recruitment and selection training or updated recruitment and selection training for managers, including that values-based recruitment, updating our candidate information and developing our social media approach, recognising that we want to make sure that we are appealing to as broad a base of potential candidates as possible, and that there's a whole range of ways that people now access information about potential employers.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Councillor Basham, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the infographic or the charts on the top of page 80 or 14 of 17, depending on how you reference it. This is the table that I think goes into the work that you said a member of staff had done as a special project. I'm just interested looking at the application count, and I don't know if I'm reading it correctly and or if it might not be statistically significant, but it just looks like we've got a white population that is the highest, and then we have a sort of lower application count but a more successful new starter count, and then we have the absolute mirror image for Asian. And I just wondered whether we've got some unconscious bias in our recruitment there, where we're getting lots of applications or a disproportionate number of applications from Asian residents, and they're not as successful as their white counterparts at interview. I don't know if I'm reading that correctly, or if you think it's not statistically significant, or if it's just something that we watch as an early warning.
Thank you for raising that point. So you are reading the graph correctly, in as much as what you've got is the light blue, which is the applications that we've received, the yellow bar, which is our new starters, and then the darker blue on the right hand side is the population count as per the census. So this was part of the project that was undertaken in terms of looking at our applicants and new starter rates. So when the sort of statistical tests were applied to that wasn't a statistically significant difference. So obviously when you've got much larger proportions of individuals applying, but that wasn't statistically significant when that process went through. Having said that doesn't mean obviously that it's not something that we won't continue to look at, and I'm not suggesting that there is an issue currently, but we will be, through our recruitment and selection training, looking at not necessarily unconscious bias training, because I think the evidence within the profession is sort of moving away from that slightly, but really looking at something more broad in terms of, I guess, almost more cultural awareness training around what we're thinking about when we recruit, what recruitment methods and selection methods that we're using. So just to try and make sure that we are as open as possible in terms of the candidates that are presented to us. But just to reiterate, as I say, when we did sort of put the numbers through and the statistical tests were applied, there wasn't a statistically significant difference. So they are very small numbers that we're talking about in terms of the differences.
That's great, thank you. I think my information is just anecdotal, but I think the demography of the borough is changing as well, and obviously that census data is 2021. So, and I think Councillor Tustain was just pointing out to me that we have some similar, probably statistically insignificant differences around the headcount stuff, in particular the 25 to 34 age group, which, if I read that graph correctly, means that they are perhaps overestimating their their ambition, and or to high number of applications, less successful, which I think would be consistent with perhaps early stage careers.
I think if I can just briefly respond to that. So in addition to the wider work we're doing around recruitment, we do actually have one of our graduates who's joined us on the LGA graduate programme who is specifically doing some work with us around early careers or youth recruitment, both in terms of attraction and recruitment and also in terms of retaining individuals within the organisation. So we are aware that that younger demographic is particularly an area that we do want to look at. So absolutely it is about making sure, yes, we need to recruit people with the right skills and the right experience for the role, but making sure we're really clear that we don't overstate what those skills and experience needs to be.
Councillor Tastain.
Just following on from that, then I think it looks like, reading this on the age side, that what's been offered isn't attracting the older generation, potentially because you've got very low figures in that 55 plus, which doesn't reflect the population. I think this is I think it's a national problem, isn't it, where they are saying that older people are not choosing to come back in. But I don't know if there's any thoughts on that one, or if there's anything that you don't think about doing to actually try and attract potentially more mature people back into the workplace.
So yeah, I think going back to the point that I made previously, although that over 55 does include everyone over 55 from a census perspective, so it will look kind of disproportionate for that reason, but that doesn't mean that we're not aware that that is an area that we do want to look at. I think interestingly, when we actually went through the data and sort of processed it, we were finding that we were actually increasing the number of new starters who were in that older age group. But again, these are things that we need to look at over a longer period of time in terms of understanding what the trends are. But yes, as much as we're looking at social media and that younger workforce, we are also considering the older workforce. And in some of these skill shortage areas, we absolutely have to look at how we can encourage people maybe back to work who had not considered doing so before. So that is an area for us to consider.
Councillor Basham.
I would just like to add that I was going to say this sort of data is a luxury, but it's not. That's the wrong word. It's not a luxury. It's essential. But I think that the fact that the council has it and is considering it, is acting on it, is great. And I just wanted to express my gratitude and congratulations on the depth and granularity of the information.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and we'll absolutely pass that back to the team. And I think, if I may, just in terms of the data within this report, it does take a huge amount of time for the team to put it together, but I think it is really important and is really helpful for us. The other thing I would say, just to go back to your previous point around the census data, even if it looks like we are reflecting the borough, you're right, the borough is always changing, and we absolutely want to take account of that, but also we want to be more than representative. So if our community isn't as representative as others, we want to do everything we can to encourage people, both from within the borough and outside, to come and work for the organisation. So it is an ongoing piece of work, and this data really helps us to focus on the areas that we need to.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Any discussion at all? In which case, I move for the recommendation to the committee that we note the report. Is everybody in agreement? Yeah. Thank you. And on to item 9, Pay Policy Statement 2024 to 2025. And again, the recommendation to the committee is recommends the Pay Policy Statement at Appendix 1 to the Council, and note the existing delegation to the Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development update the pay policy statement as a result of any pay awards which the Council is contractually bound to agree. The report proposes a pay policy statement for the Human Resources Committee to recommend to Council. Again, the contact officer is Sarah Cragg. Over to Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So every local authority must produce an annual pay policy statement for the financial year, which is adopted by Council and reviewed annually. So what we have in front of us is covering report, and Appendix 1 is the proposed 2024-2025 pay policy statement. So unusually last year we ended up with 2 pay policy statements, one that was approved as usual and live from April, and then we did have an additional one in July which reflected the updates as a result of the pay and benefits review. So the Localism Act sets out what information has to be included in the pay policy statement, and these are listed in section 2.5. So the pay policy statement really is just seeking to cover everything that we are required to share and publish around that. And also it's really important for us as an organisation that we have that level of transparency around how our salary structure is and what payments are made to staff within that. So section 3.2 summarises the key changes from the previous statement that was passed in July 23. So we've had general updates in terms of years, job titles and salary figures where these have been updated. The other updates really are in relation to the progression of the pay and benefits review. So a number of the sections referred to things having recently happened or explained why we were implementing things, but Culm Ferry Hay, as an example, is what we are now going with as a job evaluation system. That is our job evaluation system. So these references to new systems or explanations as to why we're using them have been reviewed. In terms of other highlights from the statement itself, the pay ratio, which is one of the things we are required to include within the statement, is the gap between the highest paid employee and the median salary at the council. So although that has increased very slightly from the statement in July 2023, that still remains low at 4.48. The other thing obviously to reference is that the National Pay Award offer for 24-25 has not been determined. That's not really any movement on that nationally at this stage. So as and when more information becomes available for that, and as highlighted, if there are payments that we're contractually obliged to make, then we will seek to make those in line with the pay policy statement.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Tastain.
I just had one question about what's the standard working week hours?
It's 37.
Councillor Basham.
Just in relation to item 3.3, the council's pay ratio, obviously it's gone up by 10%, but it says the council's pay ratio remains low at 4.48. What are you comparing it to when you say it's low? Are you benchmarking against other councils or other sectors or similar? And what would you think would be a median or a high number if we were looking at there?
So predominantly it is other councils because, as I say, the pay ratio is something that councils are required to report as part of their pay policy statement. So that is easily accessible, publicly available information. I don't have a particular figure actually in terms of what we would consider a medium and a high, but that's something that we can think about if that would be useful in future in terms of providing that wider benchmarking information.
I think statistically it identifies that either our median pay is higher than in other places, or our top paid employee is lower than in other places. I think considering the Corn Ferry job hay evaluation you've just been through, I think the first one of those would be nonsense. And so I just wanted to draw attention publicly to the fact that our chief executive or our head of paid service does I think a very good job on perhaps lower pay than he would earn elsewhere. That's not new news, I don't think, but I just want to draw attention to it and thank him.
Without wishing to go into specifics around that, the benchmarking data would bear that out.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? In which case, is everybody happy to recommend the pay policy statement at Appendix 1 to Council? First of all, yeah. And to note the existing delegation to the Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development to update the pay policy statement as a result of any pay awards. Is everyone happy with that too? Thank you. Right. So on to Statement 10, review of the works programme. The committee is asked to note and review its work programme. Sarah Gregg.
Thank you. So as set out in the report pack, we have a number of our standard reports due to come to the next committee, which is scheduled for September 2024. So our twice yearly HR workforce update, which is the data report that we've just talked through. There are 3 policies which are due to come in their regular review round, which is our capability policy and procedure, redundancy handling and whistleblowing. There's 2 annual reports, which is our health and safety and termination costs report. And then I would anticipate being able to provide a further update around the progress of the pay and benefits review.
Is everybody happy with the review as it stands? Okay. I think that's it, isn't it? In that case, I move that we close the meeting. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you very much to the officers for all their work on preparing this, and to Bernie for taking the minutes there. And particular thanks to Jade for her hard work on the work that she put in there too. Thank you. Bye-bye.